ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So let's come back to our Saturday morning talk. We will conclude the session of Maya today. So let us recapitulate a little bit and then we will conclude it with some stories, very interesting, fascinating stories. First of all, as we understood, Maya gives an appearance which is not the reality. Maya, it actually means that which is not. So this is a very deceptive appearance which we get from Maya. In Vedanta, very often the example of rope and snake has been given, that in darkness you find that a rope appears like snake. Exactly in the same way, without enlightenment, this world appears to us in a very different way than the reality is. And this world becomes very enchanting, very fascinating, very spellbinding, very hypnotizing in our day-to-day life. This world keeps us completely engrossed and engaged. There are four fundamental pillars of this engagement. The first pillar is the wealth. We want to earn a lot of wealth and we get completely engrossed in the process of earning that wealth. Then people want to acquire power. That is another one. So people get completely engrossed in how to grab power, how to acquire power, how to become very powerful. So that keeps engaged a lot of people are engaged in that process. Thirdly is the sexual desire, which is very, powerful and keeps everybody engaged, how to satisfy that desire. And fourth is the prestige or the social, recognition. These four pillars, they keep us completely engrossed in the world of Maya. And these pillars are actually driven by our ego, by our ahem, that I am somebody. So the ahem drives these four pillars and we remain engrossed and engaged into those pillars throughout our life without realizing that there's something beyond that. This is exactly the way we were talking about the cinema hall. You are sitting in a cinema hall. There's nothing but the sound and light, and you are completely engrossed and you feel that everything is happening in front of your eyes. You become emotional. You become part of the story. Exactly the same way this world keeps us engaged through these four important pillars, and those pillars are driven with the help of our ego. So this is the fundamental principle of Maya. But what is this world? This world comes from where? Now this is very important to understand. This world actually starts with Mahat Tattva, which is impregnated with three gunas, that is Sat, Raj and Tam, and that gives rise to this world. It is exactly the replica of an ocean. The ocean down below is absolutely quiet. On the top, you find tremendous amount of waves which are going here and there and colliding and hitting. Those waves are arising from the ocean, but ocean is deep down, absolutely quiet. Exactly the same way, the reality in this world where we live is quiet, deep down, spread everywhere, but the world of Maya keeps floating over it, and it's with like waves keep circulating everywhere and affecting our mind very profoundly in so many ways. So this is the way the comparison between the ocean waves, ocean, similarly the reality of the existence and the world of Maya which is like the waves on the top of the reality, which keeps, colliding, running, hitting, and, keeping us engrossed all the time. Now, how we will, on this Satraj and Tam, we will go into little detail with the help of Bhagavad Gita, but I'll come back to that little later. First, let us, understand a few other things of the well of Maya. This well of Maya is, we are chasing this like we chase a mirage in a desert. In a desert, when you are thirsty, you are looking for water, and you look ahead. And I have seen it in practice in my life when I was traveling in Saudi Arabia in the Gobi, in the Rub al Khali desert, and also in Mongolia in Gobi desert. You feel that after a little while there is a source of water, and you go towards that, and then the mirage continues to move forward and forward and forward. It's like the horizons, when we see that the horizons, the ocean and the sky are meeting somewhere, and when you move forward, you find that the horizons continue to move forward and forward as you move there. So it just gives an impression that they are meeting, but they are not really meeting anywhere. And exactly the same way as the mirage gives you the impression that there is a source of water right there, but it is not there. When you reach there, you find only desert sand, and that's it. So this is the mirage which we are chasing in this world, for looking for the happiness. Happiness through wealth, happiness through power, happiness through sexual desires, happiness through prestige in the society. And this happiness, when we chase, we ultimately end up with distress, because there is no happiness in this world. It's a cycle of what you call pleasure and pain. You get pleasure for a little while, and then you end up again in the pain, then again pleasure and pain. So this is a cycle which continues throughout our lives, because that is the nature of the physical world. So this is the mirage we chase. This is what the Maya is, and we are chasing this, helplessly all the time, because our mind is an instrument which collaborates with this. Now, mind collaborates with this because mind is always giving you duality. It causes doubt in your mind, in your thinking process, that should I do this, should I do that, should I do? So it creates duality, and in the process of duality, it gives you an impression that continue to do this, it will give you pleasure. Then when you fail to get that happiness there, then it gives you another option that okay, you follow this option and you will get happiness there. And this mind keeps driving you in different directions. So this mind collaborates with us in this process of mirage, which we are chasing in this world for our happiness. So this is how the things actually work in this world, in the world of Maya. Now, we have to understand one fundamental thing, and I'm taking help of Mandukya Upanishad here to explain that when we are in the dream state of mind, which is called Tejas Avastha or Tejas state, you have a dream and you become part of that dream world and you feel it is all real. During the time of dream, you are fully engrossed, engaged in that dream. But as soon as you wake up, you realize, oh, it was only a dream. It was nothing but just a dream. But that realization happens only when you wake up. When you are in the dream state, that does not happen. Similarly, when you are in this Vaisnava state, that is the waking state where we are right now, this waking state gives you the what you call ability to feel the physical world, to understand the physical world. Like you can use your five senses and you can touch and you can taste and you can hear and you can see, those those sense organs work in this physical world. But this gives you an impression of a reality, that this is solid real world. And we do not understand the functioning of Maya because of this impression which we get through our sense organs and through our mind. It gets completely reinforced again and again every single day that yes, this is the reality. I'm looking at, this is the refrigerator, I'm touching it, this is the refrigerator. And this is food I'm eating, this is my house where I'm living. And this gives an impression that this world is solid and I'm living in a solid world. And all this talk of spirituality is just nothing. That's the feeling we get in the real world. Now, if we look at the modern science, I think modern science actually today confirms what Vedanta wrote thousands of years ago. If you go into the scientific principle of matter, now matter has been examined by science because it exists physically. And they have come to the conclusion that it is formed of atoms. Atoms form the matter. And they also came to know that there are proton, neutron, and electron. These are the three components of atom which constitute the atom. Now they went further down. They started calling it what is subparticle, physics. Physics of the subparticles. You go further, you divide the particles further and go down. And this has been done by the modern science. And as they keep dividing the particle and subparticle into smaller and smaller particles, they find that it becomes waves. It is no longer matter. It is a wave. So the waves, a collision of waves or a pattern of waves appears like matter, and it gives you an appearance of the solid world. That is what modern science is saying. This is what Vedanta said thousands of years back. But modern science today, they say, this is called the quantum principle. This quantum principle is actually reinforcing the principle of Maya, which was propounded thousands of years back. This quantum principle clearly tells you that when you break, everything is made of the atom in this world. That is what the science would tell you. That atoms are everywhere. Our body is made of atom, and this wood is made of atom, or a refrigerator is made of atom. There are millions of atoms which constitute a particular item. Those atoms can be subdivided into subparticles, and once you keep dividing them, they become waves. They turn into waves. And the waves actually appear like solid objects. That is what science is telling you today. It is not the solid object, but the wave appear like solid objects. And that is what our principle of Maya says, that the reality is very different. It appears like solid objects. And this difference we will recognize and we will understand once our consciousness leaves this body. Once we die, it means that time you will get out of that dream. Like you get out of the dream state and you come into the waking state. Similarly, from this waking state, once your consciousness leaves, you go into a different state. In that state, you will realize that this world was nothing but a dream. But in this life, when you are living practically here, you cannot recognize it. Exactly in the same way as in the dream state, you do not understand that this is dream or reality. The dream is reality. Precisely the same way in the waking state, you feel this is all reality, but once the consciousness leaves your body, it becomes separate. Then you will realize through that consciousness, because you are pure consciousness, you will realize that this was nothing but a play of sound and light. It was just a wave which came and went away. So this is the scientific explanation which I wanted to give you before we go into what we call the explanation given in chapter 14 of Bhagavad Gita. And I would like to, quote those verses. And these are very profound explanations. This is verse number 3, 4. Let me read them out first. And then it goes up to verse number 9. A very profound explanation given by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. The verse number 3 reads like this: Mam yonir brad brahm tasmid garbham tadhyayam sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharat. Sarva yonisu kontay murtay sambhavati ya tasam brahm mahat niram bij pradipita. Now, the meaning of these verses is that this prakriti, this nature, this made of 5 great elements and 3 gunas, that is prakriti. Prakriti is 5 great elements, Panch Mahabhut, that is Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, and Prithvi. These are 5 great elements. And 3 gunas, that is Raj, Tam, and Sat. These 3 gunas and these 5 elements, that is called Prakriti. Now, Krishna says here that this Prakriti is the place of Garbhadhan. ये Prakriti गर्भ का स्थान है. That is where all the birth takes place. And उसके उस प्रकृति के अंदर I put the Chetan Roop Beej, that is the consciousness. I impregnate this prakriti with consciousness to give birth to all the bhutas, that is all the existence which comes into being. He is the place of, is like the womb, and the consciousness is impregnating that prakriti, and as a result of that, all the beings, all types of existence is coming out. That is what he has said in these 2 verses. That all the जितनी प्रकार की योनियों से जितने प्रकार की मूर्तियां निकलती हैं, they all come through this process. That the impregnation of Prakriti through consciousness gives birth to all the manifested universe which we see around. He says in verse number 5 that Sat, Raj, and Tam, these 3 gunas, along with the 5 elements of nature, they trap the consciousness into body-mind complex. That is the verse number 5. That the body-mind complex comes into being, 5 elements of nature, 3 gunas of nature. They trap these 5 plus 3. They trap the consciousness into body-mind complex, and then it becomes what you call a species. It could be human being, it could be animal, it could be insect, it could be any other living being. So this is the process through which all the living beings are coming into being, coming into existence in this universe. This is a very, very profound explanation of how we are born and how the nature plays its role in trapping the consciousness. This is trapped exactly in the way which we discussed earlier, like Akash. You have Akash, all around you. Out of that Akash, you can divide it into a bathroom, into a bedroom, into a house, into a go down. They are broken, it becomes part of Akash again. But so long as they are in that form, we call it a go down, we call it a toilet, we call it a bedroom, or we call it a shopping mall, because they have been trapped into a particular situation. The Akash has been trapped. And this is the example the Vedic literature has given. कि जो पोर्ट में जो आकाश है और पोर्ट के बाहर जो आकाश है, that is same. As soon as the walls of the port are broken, the akash becomes one and the same. Like the wall of the house falls apart, the akash merges with akash. There is no house anymore. So the house is only as long as these walls are there. So these walls trap this akash exactly in the same way. The walls of the three gunas and the five elements trap the jiva or the consciousness into the body, mind complex, and then we become a species, whether it is animal or human or whatever living being is. So this is the process. Free this entrapping process. We have to free this entrapping process so that we merge with the universal consciousness into the Brahman. As soon as all of the port are broken, the akash becomes one and the same. As soon as the walls of our body-mind complex are broken, this merges with the Almighty, and we ourselves become Almighty in the process. That is why the Rishis in Upanishad say that I am Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi, because this Akash or this merges with the universal consciousness. So this is the process we have to understand. But underlying everything in this universe is universal consciousness. Nothing exists without that consciousness. Everything comes out of that as the waves come out of the ocean. Exactly in the same way, the manifested world comes out of the consciousness which is underlying everywhere, and it appears like a solid world where we are, a player. This appears solid because, as I explained, scientific principle, if you keep breaking atoms and go into the subparticle, they turn into wave, because the wave is something like consciousness in that sense. And this world, which is solid, which appears solid, it's only an appearance of the waves. The wave appears like solid objects in this world. This whole process works, and this has been very deeply explained in Bhagavad Gita in this chapter 14. Now, how do we keep ourselves engaged in this world? That has also been explained, how these three gunas keep us engaged in this world. The sattva guna, that is, a very pure, good qualities, how do they keep us engaged? A person who is acquired knowledge, who has acquired enlightenment, he also remains engaged because of that knowledge. Like a professor, I'm a professor. I can say that I'm a teacher. Or somebody else can say, oh, I know all this, I know all the Shastra. Now that, ego, the ego which is coming out of acquisition of knowledge, acquisition of enlightenment, gives you entrappings, and that keeps you trapped, because you become asakt, you become attached to that process. And as soon as you become attached, you are engaged in the world, and you are trapped in the world. That is what happens. The engagement in the world comes through this asakti. So the sattva gun gives you the asakti that you are doing great things, you are a philanthropist, and you are a knowledgeable person. That feeling, as soon as you get that feeling, it keeps you entrapped. Rajogun keeps you entrapped through variety of passion and activities. Somebody is engaged in business, somebody is engaged in sports, somebody in music, somebody in in engineering, somebody in scientific discoveries. All these professions which you pursue, they are part of the Rajogun. And Rajogun keeps you engaged because of those different pursuits which we follow in our life. And once we get attached to those pursuits, we are completely trapped again, because the attachment comes in, and that attachment keeps us fully engaged and engrossed in this world. And of course, the Tamogun keeps you, because that is Alasya, Nidra and Pramad. These are the three qualities of tamogun, alasya, nitra, and pramad, and that keeps you fully engrossed and engaged. You don't do anything beyond that, and that is how the what you call the matrix of these three gunas work on human beings, and they keep us engaged. And that is why we have to, which has been emphasized time and again, that you have to go beyond the three gunas. You have to rise. Even Satgun you have to leave after a while. It gives you enlightenment, but after a while you have to leave all the three gunas. So the final conclusion in this is that you have to leave what we call the role of doer, kartapan ka abhiman. That is the key word, that I am not the doer. The doer is the samasti, doer is the almighty, or doer is the nature, whatever name you give, doesn't matter, but we have to get rid of this this feeling that I am the doer. That is the root cause which keeps us trapped everywhere here. Now, getting rid of doership is not easy process, and that is why we do the meditation and all that, so that we stabilize our mind and we get out of this process. But that is a different subject we'll talk about. But ultimately, you have to think that what do you do in life? There was a little debate the other day, and also with one of my friends, that okay, I gave birth to my children. No, you don't give birth to your children. You are simply an instrumental in the process, because the world has to go on, the world has to move in. The nature has given you those temptations. The nature has given you that energy and the temptation of sexual desire to give birth to the children. That's how the world moves, because that is the natural process. If that temptation is not there by the nature, you will not do it. You are not the doer. You take that very big example. So, in any field of life, so long as you have the feeling that I am the doer, we are on the wrong track. We should feel that, okay, I am an instrument which the nature is using, or the samasti is using me for that process. That is fine. I am a small little cog, and the srishti or samasti is using me for performing this task, and that is where we have to be content to get rid of doership. So now, I would like to conclude this talk with a very fascinating story from Mahabharata. That is the story of Yayati. Yayati is actually the ancestor of the Kuruj, ancestor of Dhritarashtra, and what you call Puru and Kuruj, and before that. Now Yayati was, it's a very fascinating story. Yayati was a king, and he was wealthy, he was ruling, he was very, very happy. Everything was fine. And that was the time when there were a lot of fights between the good and the bad. That is Asuraj and Suraj. That is the name, or Daityaj and Suraj. So there was another kingdom where there was a teacher called Sukracharya. Sukracharya is a very famous guru of Daityaj, very famous guru of the Asuraj, the people who were doing. Now that teacher, Asura teacher, was actually working in the forest, but also helping the Asura king called Vrishparva. Vrishparva was the Asura king at that time. He was helping, and the Sukracharya had acquired a very fascinating power called Sanjeevani power, and he could infuse life into a dead man. So the Suraj, the team led by Indra, they were completely scared, because as soon as somebody dies, this person Sukracharya infuses life into him and he's back in the battlefield. So this was going on. So of course there are many stories attached to that. I don't want to go into the story of Kutch, which is that story of Brahaspati's son, who is sent to Sukracharya to acquire this power. But I would avoid that. I would like to go directly to the story which is related to our talk today. Now, Sukracharya had a daughter, and her name was, what you call Devyani, very famous name which you must have heard. Devyani was Sukracharya's daughter. And Vrishparva, he had a daughter, and her name was Sharmista. Sharmista was her name. Now, Sharmista, since Vrishparva and Sukracharya were working together, Devyani and Sharmista also became friends. And they were going to the, walk and jungle and bathing together once a while. So one day they went for a sarovar to take for a bath, and Devyani and Sharmista both were taking their bath. They came out. By mistake, Sharmista put on the garments of Devyani, and as a result, Devyani was very furious. Devyani was the daughter of Sukracharya, and she told that I am much superior because my father is the guru of your father. And in any case, that time the Brahmins were considered higher than the Kshatriyas. So that was another reason. So she became very angry that how could you spoil my garments, what did you do? And she decided to leave her in the jungle naked and put her in a well. So she was thrown into a well, and Devyani returned back. Meanwhile, Yayati was going through the same forest. He was going for hunting, and he felt thirsty, so he was looking for a well. He saw this well where Devyani was, the water was not very high, so she was still trying to get out of the well and surviving, shouting. So finally, Yayati helped her to come out of the well. She came out of the well. And then Yayati fell in love with Devyani. Yayati fell in love with Devyani. So Devyani and, I got a little bit confused here. Let me repeat it. The Sharmista was thrown into the well, and Sharmista came out. And then they came back. Meanwhile, Yayati and Devyani met separately, and Yayati fell in love with Devyani. In the meantime, Devyani used Sukracharya, her father, to tell Sharmista's father that Sharmista should serve as her servant because she misused my clothing when we went to the sarovar for a bath. So the king had to agree because this Sukracharya was a very powerful man, and he had that power of infusing life into a dead person. So as a result, the Sharmista was working as a servant with Devyani. And Devyani and Yayati decided to get married. They married. After the marriage, Sharmista was also taken by Devyani with her, and she was working as maid servant, and she lived in the palace of Yayati. Though she was separated from Yayati, but Sharmista was also very beautiful. At some stage, Yayati and Sharmista also, started liking each other. Sharmista told Yayati that, okay, even if you don't love, don't marry, but at least I have a right to give birth, to become mother, and therefore you should have, relationship with me. So as a result, Yayati had relationship with Sharmista, and he was married to Devyani. Devyani gave birth to 2 children, and Sharmista gave birth to 3. This was a hidden story for a long time. After some time, this became out that Yayati was also in love with Sharmista. So Sukracharya, the father of Devyani, became absolutely angry. And he cursed Yayati that right now you should become old. All your sense organs will not function, and you will have desires, but you will not be able to fulfill those desires because you misbehaved with my daughter. So this was a shock, and Yayati became old immediately. He started, feeling all his sense organs have become powerless, and he started behaving like an old man. But at the same time, Devyani was not very happy with that. So Devyani went back to her father, Sukracharya, that this is a very difficult curse. Please don't do it. Take it back. But Sukracharya did not agree, so it's not possible to take it back. But there is a way out. If one of Yayati's son agrees to sacrifice his youth, then Yayati can acquire that youth and he can again become young. So Yayati had 5 sons, 2 from Devyani and 3 from Sarmista. He approached each one of them. None of them agreed. The youngest one, Puru, he was the son of Sarmista. He agreed that, okay, I will sacrifice for my father, my youth. All others said, no, you have already enjoyed life. Why are you depriving us of our enjoyment of life? But then Puru sacrificed, and Puru gave his youth, and Yayati again acquired his youth. And Puru became old immediately. This way Yayati lived for a long time, according to Mahabharata, for 1,000 years. He lived and he enjoyed the world. At the end of that, he realized that what he was doing, he had such a long span of youth. Still he was unhappy. He was not able to acquire or get that eternal happiness which he was looking for. And he started becoming unhappy every single day, more and more. The degree of our unhappiness started increasing every single day. And one fine day he said, no, this is not correct. So he called his son Puru that you take back your youth and I want to become old and retire and go away. Because he was completely fed up with the world after living more than 1,000 years in that state of youth where he was supreme king. He was able to enjoy every comfort of life, every single thing, and still he was unhappy. So the lesson of the story was that even if you have 1,000 years to yourself, even if you are young, even then this world is not going to give you eternal happiness. You will become unhappy even despite all that. You may be the most powerful king. You may have youth for 1,000 years. You may fulfill all your desires. Even then you will not be happy, because eternal happiness is beyond this world. It is in the eternal existence of reality. It is not in this world, which is like waves of the ocean. So this is the story which tells us that despite all the comforts you can have, all the power you can have, all the prestige you can have, you will not be able to satisfy your desires in this world. You will not be able to acquire eternal lasting happiness in this world. The world will ultimately return to you the distress and the unhappiness. And this was one of the principal reasons behind Buddha as well. When he was Siddhartha, he was a son of a great king. He had all the facilities, and he was given all the facilities in abundance, so that because at his birth, one Pandit had told the king that either he will become a big sannyasi or a big king. So the father did not allow him to go out anywhere. He wanted him to stay in the palace. So he had organized all facilities for him. But one day, by mistake or by chance, he went out and he saw a dead man, and he saw a sick man, and he saw an old man, and he realized his own unhappiness in this world, and he decided to abandon the palace and go for what you call penance or tapasya, and then he became Buddha, enlightened later. So this is what happened with Yayati. Yayati is the founder of the Kuru dynasty, where of course Yudhishthira was there, Shantanu was there, and even Bharat was there before that. They were all his successors. His immediate successor was Puru, that is his own son, who gave his youth to Yayati, and Yayati endured that for about 1,000 years, and then he realized the futility of all that and gave up that back to Puru, and then Puru became the king. He retired to a life of a sannyasi in a forest and went away. So this is what I thought I would like to conclude with this story, the futility of looking for eternal happiness in this world, because this physical world itself is not stable. How can it give you stable happiness? It is not possible. It is constantly changing. It's undergoing transformation every single moment. Similarly, our body and our mind is also undergoing change every single moment, and therefore we cannot find lasting, durable happiness or eternal happiness in this world. We have to go beyond this world. We have to look for what we call beyond the three gunas. We have to leave aside our ego as the doer, and we have to understand that there is a supreme power underlying all this reality of the world, which is governing the entire world. And this world is merely an appearance, as the quantum theory has now accepted. And I think that is what we have to understand to get rid of the veil of Maya. The veil of Maya can be removed only through this kind of thinking, and then we will understand the reality underlying this world. So thank you very much. I think with these words, I would like to conclude this session. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer the questions.